Welcome back. We're continuing with our introduction to using GUI and Java, and we're going to be adding a model package. And so we want to make it so we have some interactivity with the actual model of an MVC package structure. In our demo GUI, we've got a new package right here called demo.model, using my standard naming convention of where the first part of the package reflects what we're working on in the project, and the second part of the package name reflects what the model view controller structure we're working with, so demo.model. And I'm going to stick with my magic debug duck because I love debug ducks. These are great things to talk to. They answer questions, they help you out all the time. And so we're gonna make a really simple class with that. And so we have a public class debug duck. It's inside my package demo.model. And I have a data member for question count and name. And I have a default constructor and where I initialize question count to 0. And the name on this duck is mixed quacks because it's an age-gendered duck. We don't have to have a specific information on that, so we can use any different title for that we're looking for. And then I'm going to use the magic power of generating my getters and setters so I can save a lot of time. One of the few shortcuts I actually encourage people to use after they practice doing that. And so all you have to do with that is you right click down here, go down to your source section, and then go down to generate getters and setters. You can make your getters and setters all right there for you. You don't have to worry about the extra work. I recommend doing it in getter setters first, and then having the doing the getters first, then the setters, and always making sure that happens after the constructor. That's no big deal. It's a little bit of work to go, but that's easy to do. Our next step we need to do is we need to make sure that we have some functionality with this project inside the controller, because again, everything is going to be happening. The model exists all on its own over here. The view has no idea about it. One of the analogies I use in class is it's like those lovely magic people who live inside your TV. You watch them all the time. They're really entertaining. Well, we have to have someone tell them what to do, and that's what the controller does. The controller is the one that tells the cute little debug ducks what to do. So we're going to go to our controller. In our controller, we have to add an import statement for that because, again, since it resides in a different package or folder, we have to tell Java where that is. And so we add that import statement, and the order of the import state doesn't matter. And so I have import demo.model.debugDuck. I also want to add a debug duck data member, and so private debug duck my duck. I use a boring name because, well, that works easily. Inside my constructor, I need to make sure I initialize that data member. Now, this is one of the key things we really want to watch when we're working with a model view controller paradigm, and especially when we're interacting with that model and that GUI, we want to make sure that we always initialize our data members first before we do anything inside the GUI, because if there's any data that needs sent from the controller off to the view when it first gets displayed, we want to make sure that's all initialized and handled appropriately. So that means all data members, like if the model package or any data that's going to be used to go into the view, needs to be initialized first before we actually get to the view itself. And so this.myDuck equals new debug duck needs to happen before I say this.windows new demo frame, passing the reference to the controller, because I have to make sure it exists first before I send it off. So that's one great thing to recommend. The next thing we have to do when we're talking about working with the debug duck is we have to have a way for the panel itself to handle that. And so we need some accessor methods we can actually work with the debug duck inside our project. These are the two methods I have right here, update questions and get duck info. The first one, update questions, is a void method. It affects the internal state of our duck. And that's why we're using void, because it simply changes the internal values of the duck itself. And so we use that as a void method because it doesn't want to give anything back. The next method, get duck info, retrieves the information about that internal state. So we have access of a mutator and accessor method that's going to be used to actually talk to the duck, and it's using it as the go-between with our controller to make that happen. So that's what we're going to start off with. Let's take a look at the update questions first. And so we're going to make this really, really basic. So update questions is going to get the current question count of our duck, and we're going to store it in a variable called count. I know, really creative, I know. Then we're going to say count plus equals 1. We're going to update that value by 1 and then assign that value back into the duck using the setter attached to it of set question count. So we're using a getter and a setter to affect to retrieve the state, change that state, and assign that back into the actual data member right there. So we have that access using the setter right there. And that's how, again, we can use those public methods when, even though the view has no idea about it, the view does know that there's a public method called update questions that I can access on the controller right here. I can retrieve data from the duck using the getDuckInfo method. And then I just use string concatenation to say duckInfo is blank, info plus equals myDuck.getName, and then has answered as many questions and get question count, and return that associated string right there. So I have information that I can access about the duck right here, so I can get the duck's information inside my controller. Finally, the next step is we need to be able to use that information inside our panel. So let's go ahead and go to our panel. Now that we've actually created the information, we need to access a new button. It's just another J button called duck button. I know, very creative right here. Inside my constructor, of course, I initialize the duck button, say, I'm a duck related button. I know, so amazing. Then, of course, we use our setup panel and setup listeners helper methods so I can get that information and go with that. So let's go to setup panel, and inside setup panel, I just add a new line, this.add duck button, so I'm putting that button inside there. And when I run this application right here, let's go ahead and click that up. it automatically, since I'm just using the default layout, just puts the duck related button right there on the screen. Wonderful stuff, I know. And now we go to setup listeners, and inside our setup listeners, this is where we're gonna make some changes. We have, of course, have to make a new listener for the duck button, so we can have that happen. That's what we're gonna start off with. And then, of course, it has action performed inside there. And what we're going to do is we're going to add a line to both the demo buttons listener as well as the duck button listener so we can see the effect of what's going to happen. And so the demo button, after I call the set background, I'm going to say controller.update questions. So every time I change the color of my background, it's like I'm asking my duck a question about something for code related. So that's the controller.update questions. And then inside my duck button, I want to say string model data. I want to retrieve that data from that because the model itself has no idea. As you can look up here in my imports, I don't have anything to do with the model in here. I have my controller reference right here. I have my GUI component stuff right there, but there's no reference at all to my model package. It doesn't know that ducks exist, other than the fact that I named it debug duck, but that's cool. So I go back down here, but that model data, I'm retrieving that data from that because I'm calling controller.getDuckInfo. It's the model data from this duck. And I want to use the duck button set text, and I'm going to pass it that text about that. And so what I can do now is every time I change my color inside my app, click, 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 and I click that button, I can then, Mixquack has answered this many questions, 3. I click it again, and it goes up to 4, because even though this GUI has no idea that the duck exists, the GUI itself is able to talk to the controller vis-a-vis that public accessible method of update questions and get duck info. And it can retrieve that information and change that information using those go-between methods. And so we can get information from the model, have it be processed inside the controller, and then brought back and shown in the display. And that's how you can do some really cool stuff using model view controller and keeping the appropriate split of roles and information in the appropriate classes, so we don't have to have too much information sharing and require our code to be allows our code to be easier to customize and update more appropriately when we're looking at making bigger and better projects. And so again, we do this by having a separate model package where we do all the stuff that we work with in the duck itself, and it knows how to do things that ducks can do. And then the controller can tell that duck to do that information. The controller is the one that's responsible for sending those public information and calling that, because the controller has a reference to that duck instance or duck instances that it'd be working with. Say, for example, I had an array list of ducks and I change all the duck information overall. Boom, 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 boom. We could have that happen right there. And finally, because that controller has public methods they can use to affect the duck itself, I can call those public methods inside the controller, inside the panel, because I have a reference to that panel right here as a data member that I send as a parameter to the constructor that initializes it with a singleton reference to that entire thing. So I can do some cool stuff all the way across. That's how I can interact with the model view controller paradigm across the different packages inside Java and have some really cool projects. Thanks again. Have a great day. Hope you can do some fun stuff with this and have a great time. Cheers. Bye-bye.